G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. If you've noticed a slight change in audio quality, well, you would be pretty good with the ears because that is the Go XLR Mini, which is the audio mixer that I was talking about in my Hurricane video. I thank you guys for watching and everything like that because it's essentially funded with ad revenue and those purchases for air models. I've actually just bought the F-35, which sort of completes my little Hurricane to Lightning 2, which is like the beginning monoplane to the current monoplane the RAF have. I thought that was a really nice little theme, and they also fit nicely on my little bedside table. They are fantastic quality if you ever want to pick some up, and of course they do help support the channel. I am also looking at a PC upgrade, which will be a pretty fucking monster build, so if any of you guys want to have a look at that and give me some critiques in the comment section below, I would be much appreciative. Anyway, on to the Focke-Wulf 190 D13, which has probably been one of the more highly requested planes for me to have a look at. The D13 has always been one of those planes that is either ridiculously strong or kind of suffering, because when the D13 was originally introduced, it was incredibly strong. It got nerfed a couple of times and sat at 6.0 where it faced jets, and then it eventually got down-tiered all the way to 5.3, which is where it sits today. Now, in the current meta, you might see several up-tiers. However, the D13 is more than capable of actually dealing with these, which we will see today. This is a full up-tier. We're all the way at 6.3, and it's going to be fun because the D13 can basically hold its own as long as your opponents are a little bit greedy, and as long as, of course, you have a little bit of luck on your side. Now, the D13 is one of the best climbers in the entire game, and for the longest time it was the single best performing at altitude propeller plane. It was superseded by the P-47M, and I believe it is also now superseded by something else, which I can't remember. Maybe the P-51H and the Griffin Spitfire, which got its 150 octane fuel a few years ago, which bumped it from 6.3 all the way to 6.7, and some would have argued at the time that it should have gone to 7.0, but we're not really going to be seeing any Mark 24s here. We're only really going to be seeing the P-51H, which is incredibly strong regardless. Now, the P-51H, I've done a video on it before, and it's basically one of those planes that you can kind of just do whatever the hell you want in. That's how strong it is. And in this case, you're going to be seeing P-51s climbing above what is one of the best climbing planes in the game, the D13. Now, in this, normally you would kind of freak out because the D13 doesn't really turn that well, but it does have one very clever thing up its sleeve. The D13 can roll. And one thing that the P-51H cannot do is roll as fast as the Doras. The Focke-Wulfs are notorious for being able to do that, and when you combine that with a dive and take up flaps, you kind of have yourself in a good position, especially when your enemy pilots are perhaps not as experienced, or alternatively, you are just a little bit more lucky. Now, I'm going to be climbing, and the key in every single prop is to climb. You want to be climbing at around 240 to 280 kilometers an hour, and this is exactly what I'm doing here. Sort of around the 250 mark is a good sweet spot, but if you want to do what I like to call a combat climb, climb at a speed where basically it doesn't matter what altitude you're at, you'll basically be combat ready. It's a little bit more risky, but I would start to sort of level off as you get to the middle of the battlefield, which is kind of what I've done here. You can see on the minimap that I'm basically bang over the A point here, which is a little bit foolish. I should have probably side climbed, because now I find myself with a P-51 above me and a P-51 below me here. The P-51 below me is going to dive. He's picking up a lot of speed there. So what I thought I might do is try and quickly nab this P-51H. Now, I'm not going to slot in neatly behind him, but I've committed to the turn anyway, and once you've started, it's probably just best to ride it through, see what happens. And you can see I'm basically stalling out, and this P-51 is sort of jetting away. Now, the P-51, I believe, has either the Merlin or the Packard, or essentially the same engine from memory that the P-51D had, except with a ridiculous supercharger or something along those lines. At the end of the day, the engine is a lot more powerful and it accelerates a lot better in a straight line than the Dora. So you'll find that the P-51 here, that not the one that I've killed because he wasn't paying attention, but this one here, who's going to put a dive onto me, is going to come in with a lot of speed and is able to leave with a lot of speed. So I'm going to turn out of his turn and then try and cut back in, but you can see he cuts underneath me. So I'm going to sort of follow through and hopefully I can make him overshoot this way. He's going to put himself into a vertical. Now, I thought he was going to roll back, and it turns out that he's not going to. He's going to try and use that acceleration to sort of squeeze some distance between him and myself. Now, due to my potato aiming, I am spraying a little bit, but you kind of can with this plane. You don't want to go too hard on the spray, but he really is starting to make the difference on that distance. He's now 1 kilometer away, and he's doing what is called dragging me out, or what I like to call he's sort of leading me away, or stringing me out, if you will. He's going to try and run me thin away from my team, which I kind of already am, but he's going to leave me nice and juicy for that Spitfire. Now, that Spitfire is a Griffin Spitfire, which means that whilst he doesn't quite turn as well as a Merlin, he does retain energy just about on the same level, maybe a little bit less, as some of the BF-109s. So I really do have to be careful in a dogfight, because whilst he can sort of maintain his energy, he will be able to cut into a turn, which is very, very deadly. The D-13, whilst it is a fairly decent all-rounded plane, obviously being more sort of geared towards climbing and energy fighting, isn't really as good at turning. So you can't sort of just hope that he's not as sort of experienced and try and force an overshoot, unless you need to take a gamble. And in this case, I kind of don't have a choice. I'm going to go vertical and try and get this P-51, and I managed to clip his wing. So as he clips his wing, I'm assuming he's about to go down, so I put my nose down to try and pick up some speed. This Spitfire is now going to start closing really, really rapidly. So I need to dive, and I'm pretty much left with no other option other than to try and cut underneath him to force an overshoot. So I'm going to cut my throttle, hope for the best, because this is going to get very, very hairy. I'm going to use my takeoff flaps here, and I'm going to roll out of his guns. Just sort of putting my wings at 90 degrees to his is the ideal way to deal with it, because at the end of the day, he'll have to use his rudder, which is obviously not nearly as strong as his elevators, and maybe his instructor will use a bit of both. Something basically works funny in War Thunder. So if you just put your wings at 90 degrees to his, you will kind of have a good time. And whilst you're sort of working to him instead of him working to you, that kind of fits in with him being behind you and about ready to shoot you. So yeah, give that a go, see how that one works. Anyway, I'm going to continue with a vertical dogfight now, because I've damaged his engine. I'm pretty confident that his engine is going to start to die and lose its horsepower in the next couple of minutes. So if I can sustain a vertical turn fight against this particular Spitfire, then I'm going to come away with a pretty easy victory. Now, I'm not going to commit to the turn right here. I thought he didn't have much energy, and it turns out he is very, very close to not having energy. But I'm going to put myself in a little bit of a dive, try and get away, and see if I can just drag him out a little bit, make that engine really start to suffer. I honestly thought that he was going to stall out underneath me, but it turns out that he wasn't even close. That could have ended very badly for me, and if you are going to try and stall someone out from underneath you, make sure you are a bit more confident in your opponent's lack of energy over you. Now, this Spitfire here is now going to try and run away, but because I damaged his cooling and potentially his engine, he doesn't really have that opportunity. So it's only a matter of time before I catch up with him, and only a matter of time before I shoot him down. I've basically come away from this dogfight with a single kill and potentially another kill in that P-51 whose wings I clipped. Now this Spitfire decides he wants to go into a vertical, and I foolishly take it. I kind of shouldn't have. I should have just gone into a vertical, waited for him to stall out, and then killed him as is. But I take it anyway, get a critical hit, which was very risky, but fortunately for me it paid off, and I managed to get my second kill. Now, I don't even have time to sort of waste here, because my team has basically fallen off a cliff, and I don't have many teammates left, so if I can save this the 410, then I can at least have someone there to back me up when one of these guys comes back to booty blast me. So I'm just going to put my plane into a dive and go straight for this particular AD4 who's engaging with the B6R3. Now, I'm not really sure if the B6R3 can outrun or out-energy the AD4, but I would hazard a guess that it can't. So this B6R3 is kind of in a bit of trouble. He's not really going to be able to do much, and the D13 being a massive energy fighter, and of course coming from altitude, is going to have a massive advantage. So I need to get there nice and quick, because it's only a matter of seconds before this AD4 gets onto the ME410-6 and shoots him down, which is something that I really don't want. Because at the end of the day, if I have at least one teammate around me in a critical battle, then I have a much higher chance of coming away with a victory. Unfortunately for me, instead of getting a flyable ME410 as a teammate, I unfortunately get an absolute ball of fire in the Ruhr. As you can see him there, Hans didn't make it. So I have to do the only responsible thing, and that is go for revenge. Now the 84 decides he wants to go up, and that is kind of smart, because at this point, as soon as I pull away, he does not have any other option. I have heaps of energy to bleed, and I'm just going to roll back onto him and try and take him out before he can do any more damage to me pillboxes, which, I don't know how, but he manages to do it, I guess with a bomb. So, this leaves me with not many rounds of ammunition left. The D13 gets, I think it was 650 or 600 rounds of ammunition, and if I come across those two guys, again, there's a P47M left, and that P51, who is unfortunately going to go back to base, rearm and repair, I'm going to need basically everything that I can get. So I'm going to try and make my way back to the forward-facing airfield and try and get myself some nice, juicy ammunition. Now, the D13 in a down tier would really not struggle, because it can basically outclimb 90% of planes at its BR, maybe 95% of planes at its BR, and it also has great energy retention. So if there was a prop that you were looking at picking up to grind, definitely as soon as this plane goes on discount or on sale or whatever, definitely pick it up. I would highly recommend this plane. When I started playing it, I was just getting absolutely fantastic games, and even today, I still do get some really, really good games. Not as seal clubby as it used to be, since a lot of German teams, for some reason, it might be because it's starting to get saturated with 288s, and obviously bombers do not do anything positive for fighter planes. So it leaves them at a numbers disadvantage, which obviously, fighters being the meta, you'll end up with a higher loss rate if you have more bombers on your team, which is unfortunate, because I've made several videos in the past on bombers and what could be done to make them a little bit better, but unfortunately none of it has really come through, which would be nice. Although, I guess there's nothing you can really do. You just try and make the most of it, kind of like what I'm doing here with my bloody Australian internet. You know what sucks? Australia has this thing called the NBN, or the National Broadband Network, which was a project to improve Australia's aging sort of infrastructure for the internet. Now, every single suburb around mine has the NBN. As for me, they said, nah, you can get it a little bit later. Now, that really sucks for me, because I kind of want to stream, and I kind of want to do other things, and I kind of want to not have to wait overnight to upload, but unfortunately, I have to live with that, and I also have to live with constant ping spikes like this, which kind of sucks. But anyway, I'm going to make the most of it, because all I have is this particular plane, less than 100 rounds of ammunition, and an energy disadvantage. No teammates around because they're all dead. And now I really have to pull my finger out to take this victory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my speed. Hopefully I'll be able to convert that into altitude a little bit later, and I can also sort of not lemming after the P47 and get swept up by the P51. I'm going to try and get my guns onto this P47M1, but unfortunately I just don't really make the connections, and that might be due to a ping spike, but I feel like if I had my aim that day, I really would have had that kill. The P51H decides he wants to come in for some juice, so I'm going to put myself up against him, going into a vertical, and now this is where I think I sign my death warrant. I managed to basically get this guy to stall out in front of my guns, but that leaves me wide open to the P-47, and the P-47 can actually turn fairly well against the Dora, even at those low altitudes, and especially because it has those big fat wings with lots of area, and that'll result in lots of lift despite it being really, really heavy. So the P-47M is just sort of sitting behind me now, and it's only really a matter of time before I get my wing taken off, and that's basically it for me. What could have been a really nice ace and a win just quite simply turned out to be 4K, and unfortunately for me, it's going to have to be the Arado to clutch up the match. He's basically he's about to get strafed by the P-47, who gets a little bit greedy. The Arado wisely kind of goes back to his airfield, and we end up winning the match. Nice and easy. A 4-kill game. Not too bad, to be honest. And the D-13 has one of the most fantastic abilities to just dogfight. It's just one of those planes that you can take into a dogfight and you will enjoy. You get some absolutely thrillers, and this was no exception. The D-13, I would absolutely recommend this. No other way. Honestly, it's a beautiful plane, and if you ever want to pick it up on a discount, I would highly recommend. Anyway, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.